Hello and welcome back to Serving Up Success with a Splash. I'm Dr. Nawtej, and very kindly my co-hosts call me the Strategy Doctor. And I'm joined by my usual two fabulous co-hosts. Firstly,
Angie, the Renaissance woman. Welcome back, everyone.
Bruce Kramer, the corporate cracker. Welcome, everybody.
Hi, Bruce. How you doing?
Good.
Good to see you on this new format on YouTube. Welcome, everybody, to our new format on YouTube. This week's episode is going to be about remote teams, virtual teams, how we manage and behave in remote settings. But first, of course, there's the usual small thing that we have to talk about before we get going on the show. Bruce, what have you got in store for us as the drink this week?
Well, this week we're featuring a bourbon of your choice. And I'm happy to say I'm drinking a Kentucky straight bourbon Mitchers tonight. And I'm drinking it neat.
It's the only way.
By the way, I love bourbon. Really love it. Prefer it to whiskey, prefer it to brandy, and I love Kentucky bourbon. So anytime you guys are back in the flying to the UK, bring a bottle of Kentucky bourbon and a bottle of red wine from Santa Barbara. Is that a deal?
It's a deal. I'm from Kentucky too, so take your pick.
Wow! I think I sort of knew that.
Yeah.
But look, let's get started because this is a fascinating topic for me, and it must be for you guys as well, because we all three of us have been alive and working during a period where there was no such thing as a remote team, a virtual team. All of us went to an office, and now none of us go to offices. We are all remote, and we manage multiple things, and multiple things are going on. Let me just kick off with this question. What was it like? What was it like when we used to work in office? And, do you like working remotely now? What's going on, Bruce? What do particularly Bruce, you've spent virtually all your career in offices.
Oh God, yeah. For me, I thought it was going to be a much bigger change than it actually has been. And we all remember we kind of got scooped into this bucket during COVID. Now, do I miss, that cup of coffee and getting together with people face to face and just hanging? Yeah, I do miss it, but I gotta say, this is awesome remote work. The ability to be able to join people from around the globe without incurring all of the expenses. I used to think how much it was to travel, even with, just simply in the U.S. or even from one location in a given area in the U.S. to another. When we all showed up in the office, you could be driving anywhere from 1 to 3 hours a day. And so for me, I don't miss any of that now. And now that, and I know we're going to talk more about it, but now that we're learning how to do this remote thing and to make it more personal, I mean, I would never go back. I just wouldn't. That's my take.
Thanks, Bruce. But Angie, what are the, Bruce has spelt out a couple of the challenges there, cost savings, being more flexible. I'd throw in another one there that talent likes to work remotely because they want that flexibility. But there must be some challenges. What have you experienced as challenges in remote working?
It wasn't new to me. So I really didn't enter the corporate world until like 2000. And I've always worked on global projects. So we always had some form of that. I mean, back then it was spider phones and, fancy things. But even at Procter & Gamble, I had almost from the beginning where I worked only 2 days in the office. So For me,
Right.
it's not new. I did when I worked at Ford. They were more old school. Sorry, Ford, but you
Mhm.
were. So that was more in the office every day, but it was still global. So as far as like the communication and whatnot, I kind of grew up in that world. So it wasn't that new
Mhm.
to me. But one thing I did notice was the difference between when we were in the office and when we weren't was I felt like, to be honest, I worked more when I wasn't in the office because
Yeah.
I almost had to prove, well, one, you were always like, okay, does everybody know I'm really working? And results should do that, but it was a weird culture and it didn't always. And then I think the other aspect of it was there was nobody to stop me. And I'm a workaholic. If I'm working on something, I'm getting it done. Whereas
Yeah.
when I'm at work, it's time to go home. People are turning the lights off. Everybody else left. Or people are like, hey, happy hour. That'll get me out of a building real quick. And at home, I didn't do that. So for me, it's a little bit different experience, I think, because I was almost worth it. Like when COVID happened and everybody was freaking out, I was like, what?
Mm.
This is not a big deal.
No
Very
change
cool.
for
We have
you.
Zoom instead of Skype, or Teams are more popular, but we'd been doing it for a while.
Well, talking of Zoom, I'm
Yeah.
going to hand over to you and talk for you to talk about communication and collaboration in a moment. But one thing I want to throw in there, and I'm hoping Bruce comes in on this as well. One thing I want to throw in there is that I think at our stage of our careers, where we built our careers, and therefore working from home remotely wouldn't have had an impact on our careers. I worry for younger people who they're working remotely and they're isolated and they how do they build a career? How do they really collaborate and talk, but position themselves? I'm thinking about positioning. How do they do that? And maybe that's Bruce, do you have any thoughts on that before we hand over to Angie and to start talking about communication and collaboration?
Yeah, I think you're highlighting the biggest concern around working remotely is that whole social aspect. Now, what's interesting is that I think we've gotten much better just within the last couple of years. Is that we don't just use something like Zoom or Teams, or there's many tools out there to allow us to see one another. I think part of the social aspect at work, and it was a two-edged sword, was just where you would talk about things outside of work. You'd really get to know one another, develop really close relationships that
Yeah,
extended beyond assignments that you were working
yeah,
on together. But I think
yeah,
what's happening is recognizing that is we're starting to use Zoom for more than just when there's an agenda. There's nothing wrong. I mean, I use it with the family. We get together and talk to one another just as if we were sitting in the room together. It goes beyond having an agenda. It can be personal. You can have a glass of wine together remotely. Now, does that replace being in person? As of yet, you never know when virtual reality hits this, but as of yet, it doesn't quite replace that. So I think the hybrid model is something that I would strongly, myself personally, and this is just a personal view, I think it's the hybrid model that still works because that will give you that ability to actually shake hands, you know, literally, stand before one another and have a real conversation where if spit flies, you'll get hit. um, and there is something to be said about that. But I also think there's a lot of opportunity to better leverage the tools like we're using right now, where it can also, be used to be more personable. And I want to add Alvin Toffler, his book, The Third Wave, that came out in 1980, and he talked about the three waves. The first wave was the agricultural revolution and then the industrial. He predicted the third wave, we would get to remote work. And one of his big things was, think about it, all of these huge buildings that were built during the industrial age was because people had to work together. They were on assembly lines and that sort of thing. So it was important to have people co-located, and they operated three shifts 24/7. what happened with corporate America, with the information age, they kept that model like we all had to be side by side. Well, no, we don't.
And in some things you still do. Like
Yeah.
Zoom isn't going to work for everybody.
No, that is true. If you're in manufacturing, absolutely. But he also said, you built these large corporate facilities that are empty 2/3 of the day.
So
Yeah.
Bruce, I'm gonna do my usual thing.
Yes.
Angie used to do it. Now I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna cut you off and hand over to Angie. Bring you back in when we start talking. When you take the lead on culture and behaviour. But Angie, talk more about what Bruce has already started about communication and collaboration, because this is really your field. The whole, you do our LinkedIn communication for both Bruce and
Yeah.
me, for example.
Yeah, well, I think, I think we should start with 7% of your communication are your words. So that's an astounding number, right? That means that so much of your communication is this, so much of your communication is your face, so much of your communication is the context and the situation. And that means that we are losing a lot when we are on Zoom. So as I said earlier, I had the privilege of kind of growing up, so to say, in this environment where I had to quickly learn how to tell people who I was. And also across cultures. So I was immediately at 22 working with Germans who, can be rude as hell, or you could say intentional and direct. There's words for it. But I had to learn all those things at once. And that's something that we're not learning for the people who didn't grow up. We're just thrown into this and they act like nothing has changed. So when you think about communicating on Zoom, I think that we have to pay a lot more attention to our body language. We can get into the camera on, camera off debate later, but I'm going to tell you, you need it on. People associate, they trust, you build relationships with what you see and what you know, with a personality. And that's hard to do with your camera off. It's hard to do when you can't see my face telling you what I truly think versus the words coming out of my mouth. So those are important things for communication. I also think that we lose energy. There's a Zoom fatigue. And when you lose energy in your communication, that's not a good thing. People get bored, they drift, they don't pay attention. So if you are running long meetings on Zoom, make sure that you're taking network breaks. Put people in breakout rooms. Make sure you're making everyone involved. It's very easy for quiet people to get lost. I mean, one of the reasons I'm so good at cutting Bruce off is because I've run a weekly Zoom meeting for 3 years with 30 business owners, and I have to cut, the big personalities like myself and Bruce, I had to cut us off because I have to make sure some of the quieter people have a voice, because it's not as easy to cut in when there's not those physical moments where you can walk closer or you can move your hands. Like right now, my hands are actually all over the place. You can probably only see a small piece of it. That's something you see in person that we don't see in real life. So those are some of the things that I would say is watch out for quieter voices. Make sure that you're also watching your tone. And that again comes with energy. If you're lacking energy, your tone changes. We need to keep people engaged. You were talking about how we could communicate quickly and immediately. Well, back in the day, we still had same time. Did you guys ever have something like same time at work or instant messaging at work type of stuff? Well, it worked. Yeah, whatever you call it. But it worked for short stuff. It was great. Hey, do this. Hey, it's a 50, not a 30. Hey, it's this. But if you started to get into a conversation, did you ever notice that I would finally be like, damn it, Tammy. And I would just get up and leave and walk over there and talk to her, because there comes a point in time where those short things aren't enough because we're missing a lot. It's redeemable. We can fix it. We can work on it. But it goes back to our very first episode, awareness, action, and accountability. You have to know that it's there. You have to take action to make sure you're making up for what we're missing. And then you have to make sure everybody's on board with that. Make sure everybody has the same things. And I'm going to go to Nawtej here because yes, we all got along great. We were all, just speaking of us, serving up success, Bruce, Nawtej, and I, that's how we got together. We had a blast together. We thought we were having a good time. It was all online. But there came a point we all met together in Tampa in person, and it was different. And it energized us even more than we already were. And what's really important, and this is what I'm going to say, communication, you can do so much. but it's really good to meet in person, even if it's just once. It's really good to take that business trip just once, because after you've made that in-person connection, you can build on that forever. I'll never forget seeing Nawtej in person. I will never forget, running around town trying to find karaoke and all the boat where he was
It's
afraid
not
to
true.
swim and
That's not
da
true.
da da.
Well, we were doing that. I wasn't doing that. I'm pretty sure I was in a refined bar drinking a bourbon, listening to some piano
That's what it
music. I
was.
don't think I was running around looking for karaoke. No. That was a different trip, different
Different guy.
person. Different. I have a question for you two before we leave this section and come on to Bruce doing culture. For
No,
both
wait,
of you.
you be quiet. It's my turn for questions. It's my section.
No,
The question
you
is for you.
I mean, God, I think we've been talking for like a decade or 4 minutes, something like that, one or the other.
Oh, yeah, the question's for you.
Okay, do the question. Go on, do the question.
So my question is, based on everything I just said about, the differences, what was your experience like in the past of what made communication in person and communication online, and what happens when you meet that online person in person?
So I have a rule of thumb, and I think somebody taught me this, so it's not mine, but I can't remember who it was, but it served me well. That I can do everything on remote, except if I'm doing innovation. If I'm trying to build something new, if I'm trying to build a new product, a new service, there's got to be a big element of face to face. There's something that happens between us humans where we can do a lot of stuff remotely. We can do, I don't know, maybe 80, 90, 95%, who knows? But there's this, when we're trying to do something new, like innovate, it's good to be in person. There's something that happens when we're in person that we can't do another time. And the other thing I'll quickly mention is that I got used to Zoom and Teams really early, simply because I would lecture. I was lecturing MBA students and master students, and I had to figure out how to keep engaged 120 students. I had to figure it out because that's a lot of people, who you got to watch. Not all of them are on camera, so I had to start figuring out strategies, and we could talk about that another time. But I developed online strategies to deal with that. But let me thank you for the question, Bruce. Did you have anything to add before you go on to talk about the big topic: culture, behavior, belonging?
I don't have a lot to, again, though, I would say, Angie, to underscore still that need to get together in person is absolutely true from my perspective. But I also, God, there was just so much I took away from that conversation. I got sidetracked. The other thing I wanted to add is, don't forget, part of working remotely even puts more emphasis like on your emails, the tone you set, because we do a lot more when you're remote. Not only do you do the Zoom or the Teams or any of this type of interaction, but you also do a lot more texting and emailing as a result of being remote. Remember your tone there as well.
Hey, Bruce, real quick, great example of that. We had Danny Creed on the show, so some people may know him. So I knew Danny for at least a year before I met him in person at the Focal Point Conference. One of the reasons I go every year, I have a lot of clients there. And I knew him in person, and I always wrote very nice, professional emails, crafted the way you're supposed to craft them. And Danny and I had a good relationship, very natural and casual online, but in email, I always did that. So after I met him at the conference, our emails are totally different. He's like, hey, what's this? I'm like, no, don't do that. I mean, now we have a totally different way to communicate because we built that bond in person and we feel more comfortable throwing it out there. But to your point, before you build that bond, you have to be really careful with your emails. It could change the way you communicate on all levels.
Absolutely. So we ready for the next?
I'm ready.
Talking about culture, behavior. It's amazing because listening to you two, we've captured some key points, even as it relates to this section. But the reality is, as leaders, we can set the tone, as members of team, we have a huge opportunity to influence, if you will, the cultural components or the behaviors that we should do and not do. So, for instance, there's nothing wrong in celebrating things like birthdays or wins on behalf of the teams, doing shout outs during the meetings, that sort of thing. But do some interesting things. Do like quick icebreakers, like what's your superpower? You know, create kind of that spontaneity that comes when you're just live with one another, you know, just having a good time. You can set that tone. You know, I can recall when because one of the big advantages is you work with people around the globe. Now, here's the thing culturally, take into consideration the time zone changes. I can't tell you, working for an organization that was just about in every country there was, that became in and of itself kind of a challenge as to how to balance, because you'd have once a week meetings throughout the globe. So you had to kind of rotate. So not everybody, you know, like poor Nawtej, I mean, he was doing a lot of these podcasts at midnight. You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
we were just getting started in the bar. He was
I
ready for
know.
bed. And so you gotta be thinking, how do you mediate those kind of challenges? The other thing I would say is, now forget Zoom for a moment. I hate it when people ping at all times of night. So one of the cultural things, because remote working is such a big catalyst for working worldwide and not having to do all the travel because we can tap into one another, make damn sure you're not sending, you know, text messages at 2 a.m. in the morning or that sort of thing. So you have to be very cognizant of people's time.
Bruce, do
And
you want me to stop doing that then? Do you want me to stop sending you messages to
no,
really, what
actually,
did you
you're
say
very
before? Why
well. I
didn't
never,
we have to come on a podcast for you to tell me that? You know,
no,
just
but
just
seriously,
told me.
serious Dr. D, one of the things I realized is just how good you are working world, because you've been doing this for a long time.
You know,
And
Bruce, I would add to that that some of that responsibility is on us.
yeah,
You need to turn off because
yes,
people
Yeah.
will ping you. So
yes,
I'm in several global groups on WhatsApp, and those
yes,
people ping all day, all night. And that's okay because that's when they're thinking of it. And that's maybe when they're talking to somebody in their time zone. So part
yes,
of that, be respectful if it's one on one as much as you can. But part of that is on us to say, I don't
yes.
care that you pinged me. I'll ping you in 10 hours when I'm awake and sober and I don't want to
Yeah,
do it
you
right
got
now.
to learn to turn your phone off. You got to learn to do those things. So all of that becomes very important. One, we have to
Yeah.
be respectful of one another's time. But then to Angie's point, you take control. You just turn it off. Otherwise, you'll become a slave. And so now that we work globally, that easily. The other thing is, and Angie touched upon this, but my last point in this section that I want to take is never assume silence is agreement. That is one thing where, and this is why I want that camera on, because I want to see everybody. But even with that, it's easily when you're remote to assume silence. Oh, we got everybody. No, it's important to make sure you go around the room face to face, even if it's Teams or Zooms or something like that, and you make damn sure there's agreement. And you want to see that nonverbal when they're agreeing or disagreeing. But again, don't ever take silence as agreement, because that is deadly. It's better to communicate too much. I'm trying to think of the quote that somebody once said to me: better to communicate twice than assume once.
Yeah. Or George Bernard Shaw, the single greatest illusion or issue with communication is the illusion that it's taken place. I'm like, that's so true. You think it happened. Another thing with that, Bruce, and Nawtej, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this for different culturally. I think it's important when you do find that quiet person, or you find that, what the frog face that you see and they're not saying anything, that
Mm.
that's something you need to follow up with sometimes offline. in an individual conversation, because that's
Maybe.
something else we struggle with on Zoom. It's way easier in person to catch that person on the way out of the meeting. On Zoom, you have to actively WhatsApp that person, email them, call them to be like, hey, it didn't look like you were down with that. What's going on? What are your thoughts? Why didn't you want to share with the group? Because that's part of communication that we miss too, is that walking in and out of the room stuff. What do you think, Nawtej? Because
I think that's a, I think
Richard,
that's a, I think that's a great point, and I've noticed that all three of us do that. I've just realised in the matter of the last 25 minutes that we're actually all pretty skilled at this because, as usual, we have some
no, we're
notes, but
damn
we haven't
good.
rehearsed this. But there's a lot of information being coming back and forth, and we all have some tools and tips that we've just shared with each other. And to your last point, I've noticed that we all do that occasionally. We call each other and say, "Hey, how are you feeling, Bruce?" And it could be nothing, it could be something, but the fact is that we somehow subtly, subconsciously develop those tools.
Well, and you're very good at that. Being perceptive is more important than it used to be if you're going to be on Zoom. Nawtej
Yeah,
is an incredibly perceptive person, and so he's very good at noticing the slightest things. He's called me, and I didn't think anything was wrong. And then we talked through it. I'm like, oh, actually, you're right. I don't think I like that part. So I do. I think it's so important to be perceptive now, more than it used to be. It used to be the loudest voice in the room in person would get more done. Now it's more like the person that's watching and listening is going to be the most effective.
interesting. So, should we? I think we got time for our last section. Should we? Can we go on to that? Because I really want to
Yep.
hear your thoughts on this, and I've got some thoughts to show as well. And that's sort of the future of remote teams and tools and trust. And so, let me sort of open with this. And it's a question, as usual. It's a question because I like to hear answers. I like to sort of put you on the spot and hear an answer. So I don't know if you've done this, but how would you react if you were in a room with 120 people, a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting or something with 120 people? What would be the difference in how you would react and be to what you normally do? Bruce, you first. How would you? Yeah, because this could be the future of remote teams, right? So how would you react?
I'm going to be honest. That would make me very uncomfortable. I've spoken in front of thousands of people, and I love
Yeah,
that because you
yeah,
can feed off the energy of the crowd without focus on any one individual. But even when you're speaking to a large group, you do kind of scan and and for me, that's comforting. So if I'm on something like this, I know I can't easily, or at least I
skin.
haven't seen it yet, scan that audience and feed either from the energy or course correct because I'm putting people to sleep,
Yeah, yeah.
which usually
Never.
isn't a problem of mine.
But,
But but
you
if
would
it
No
never,
is,
way.
I like
never
to
put in.
startle people. But if I can't canvas the room, it makes me very uncomfortable. So I'm just going to be honest. I don't
Yeah,
have an answer right now because I haven't experienced that. Typically, if I'm beyond 12 to 15 people, I'm usually in a room with them
yeah,
where I haven't had to. I've been in meetings where there's 30, 40 people, but we all play a part. And typically again, you can play with your gallery views and stuff and see. And even that makes me a little uncomfortable. But man, if you got to 120,
let me
that
come
could,
back to that, Bruce, because I want to hear Angie's thoughts, and then I'll
yep,
then I'll, then
yep.
I'll come back
Go
with
ahead,
the future of
Angie.
remote team. Angie?
Yeah. I think what we miss the most when you do those is the natural small talk. If I'm in a room full of Bruce and I were in a room full of 100 and 50, 200 people
Yep.
at the conference. And it was talking to the guy in front of you, like, hey, did you go to this yesterday? There's so many things you can do.
Mm,
Also digesting the conversations. Bruce and I probably had 50 ideas sitting next to each other based on what we were hearing. Oh, we should do that. In Zoom, you're not doing that. because that person's not right there. It's not easy to do that. And when I walk into a Zoom room of 120 people, I'm not going to start small talk because I'd be a weirdo. Like if I send a direct chat to a stranger and be like, "Hey, I like your hair," they'd be like, "Oh my God, kick the stalker out," right? I mean, that would be so weird. I think it would be weird. I would block that person. So that's something we're really missing, and how to make that different is difficult. One thing I think is that if you are the moderator, if you are running that meeting, very important to have a 10-15 minute opening piece where you do networking breakout rooms. So you put people in rooms of 1 to 2 people, a virtual room, but then they can have that weird conversation. It's not weird because there's 2 people that have to create a conversation versus just trying to grab somebody out of that 120. So that's one thing I think we can do on Zoom to kind of at least begin to reclaim those small talk moments. But it is a challenge. To me, that's one of the biggest ones. Great question.
I think you've hit the I don't know what the American cliche is, so I'm trying to think of it.
Nail
So
on
I'm
the
going to
head.
use a British one, which is the hammer on the head. But I think the first thing in a big meeting like that, or a big session with that many people, the moderator, the leader, a lot of pressure is on that person.
Yes.
A lot, because they've got to make sure that happens. The second thing you mentioned, which is fantastic, you create breakout rooms. Okay, you create breakout rooms to do that. But there are things you can do, and this is the fantastic thing about technology. There are things already in the marketplace coming on the marketplace too, where you can do engagement with the whole room. You can do polls. You can do running commentary. You can do breakout rooms. You've already mentioned, but you can ask certain people to contribute. You can give warnings that you're going to ask some people to contribute, and you can give a 2-minute warning that, Bruce, I'm going to come to you in a minute and see what your experience of this is. So there are ways to create the engagement. There's a lot of tools on that. Just because I had to develop all these strategies, and I was looking at so many tools. I won't mention the precise name of the tools, but there's a lot of tools you can use, and AI tools you can use too, to just create that engagement with, that many more people. But I got to agree with Bruce. When I first did it, it was scary. It was uncomfortable.
Oh, I'm sure. 120
It was,
students. Most students that don't really want to
120
be there, and they're judging you anyway.
Well, 120 smart MBA students,
Yeah.
they want to make an impact,
Yeah.
so they're there. Look, guys, we are running out of time on this show, but we should do our usual thing of key takeaway. Angie, you first. What is your key takeaway from the week?
Well, I think this week's was that we have a lot more takeaways. This is a huge topic, and I think we all felt kind of pressed to squeeze in everything we could talk about. But one thing I'd like to highlight is that the 3 of us do work with teams if you are interested in creating something for your team outside of this podcast. We can customize programs for you, whatever the challenges that we're talking about. And it just made me think about it as we were like all squishing into this. Like I could see Bruce, and I was like, I have so much more. And Nawtej is like, I have more questions. And there's just so much that we can go through. So I just want to encourage everybody that if this is a topic that touched you and thought, well, we do need to improve our Zoom communication or our Teams communication, reach out to one of us, and we can work with an online course for you. We are happy to travel. We can do these things. So like our channel, subscribe to our channel, follow it, and whatever the topic, we're here to help you. We want to share all of our mistakes so you don't have to fail on those. You can make your own mistakes and fail faster.
Brilliant, thank you, Angie. Bruce, you that was brilliant from Angie. I'm sure you're gonna top it. Pressure.
Well, never. Just real quick though, again, I want to give a shout out to our audience. Thank you so much for everything you've provided us in terms of reviews. So I am going to say, just like Angie, hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that little bell for notifications, because we're going to start advertising our up and coming episodes. and cocktails, you'll see that fairly quick. So please subscribe. All right, my key takeaway is don't make it just about meetings. Connect outside. Do a wine night, do a coffee in the morning where you just come up to speed where everybody's at. Could be a one-on-one. Don't make Zooms specifically or these types of tools all about a meeting. Oh gosh. On behalf of all of us, always remember a great conversation and a great cocktail brings us all together and, more importantly, further. Thank you.
Like it.
Cheers.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers.